Marcus Thompson stood at the factory gates like he had every morning for the past 3 years. His uniform was always pressed, his boots always polished, but his eyes held secrets that no one bothered to notice. The other security guards called him the Ghost because he rarely spoke more than 10 words in a day. The morning sun cast long shadows across the industrial complex as workers streamed through the entrance. Marcus nodded politely to each person, his weathered hands checking identification cards with mechanical precision. At 52, his hair had turned silver at the temples, and deep lines around his eyes told stories he never shared. "Morning, Marcus," called out Jenny from accounting, her heels clicking on the concrete. He responded with his usual nod and a barely audible "morning." She had tried for months to get him to open up, bringing him coffee, asking about his weekend plans. But Marcus remained a mystery wrapped in a security uniform. The truth was, Marcus preferred the silence. Words had once been his enemy, back when a single whispered command could mean the difference between life and death. Back when he was Sergeant Marcus Thompson of the 22nd Special Air Service Regiment, one of Britain's most elite military units. Those days felt like another lifetime now. The factory job was supposed to be simple. Watch the gates, check badges, file reports. Nothing complicated. Nothing that required the skills he had spent 25 years perfecting in the world's most dangerous places. His supervisor, Bill, often joked that Marcus was overqualified for the position, not knowing just how right he was. The factory manufactured electronic components for various companies. It was clean work, honest work, and most importantly, it was quiet work. Marcus had deliberately chosen this job after his medical discharge from the Army. His hands still worked perfectly, his eyes were sharp as ever, but the nightmares had become too frequent, the flashbacks too intense for active duty. During his lunch break, Marcus sat alone in the small security office, eating a sandwich he had packed that morning. The room was sparse, a desk, 2 monitors showing camera feeds, a radio, and a small photograph tucked behind his logbook. The photo showed a much younger Marcus in military dress uniform, standing beside a woman with kind eyes and a bright smile. Sarah had been gone for 8 years now, cancer taking her while he was deployed in Afghanistan. The afternoon brought its usual routine. Trucks arrived with deliveries, employees came and went, and Marcus maintained his quiet vigilance. He noticed everything: the delivery driver who seemed nervous, the new employee who kept looking over her shoulder, the maintenance worker who arrived 30 minutes later than usual. These observations went into his mental files, habits from his previous life that he couldn't shake. At precisely 6 p.m., Marcus completed his shift report in his neat handwriting. His replacement, Tony, arrived with his usual chatter about football scores and weekend plans. Marcus gathered his things, nodded goodbye, and walked to the bus stop. The number 42 bus would take him to his small apartment on Elm Street, where he would heat up a simple dinner, watch the news, and try not to think about the past. His apartment was as organized as his workstation. Everything had its place: books arranged by height, clothes folded with military precision, and his medals locked away in a drawer he rarely opened. On the kitchen table sat a single letter that had arrived that morning, bearing an official government seal. Marcus had not yet found the courage to open it. The evening news played in the background as he ate his dinner of heated soup and bread. The reporter was discussing rising crime rates in the city, armed robberies increasing in the industrial district. Marcus listened with the analytical mind of someone who had spent years assessing threats and calculating risks. He made mental notes about patrol routes and vulnerable areas around his workplace. As darkness fell, Marcus prepared for bed with the same methodical routine he had followed for years. But tonight, something felt different. Maybe it was the unopened letter on his table, or the news report about local crime, or perhaps just the feeling that his quiet life was about to change. He had learned to trust these instincts during his military career, They had kept him alive through countless dangerous missions. He finally walked to the kitchen table and picked up the official letter. The return address showed it was from the Ministry of Defense. With steady hands that had once held sniper rifles in war zones, Marcus carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a formal document requesting his consultation on a matter of national security and a phone number to call if he was interested. Marcus folded the letter and placed it back on the table. Tomorrow would bring another quiet day at the factory gates, another day of checking badges and nodding politely to co-workers who knew nothing about his past. But deep inside, something had awakened. A part of himself he thought he had buried forever. The photograph of Sarah seemed to watch him from across the room. She had always encouraged him to help others, to use his skills for good. "You have gifts," she used to say, "gifts that could save lives." As Marcus turned off the lights and headed to bed, her voice echoed in his memory, and for the first time in 3 years, he wondered if his quiet life at the factory was really where he belonged. Outside his window, the city hummed with its usual nighttime sounds. Unknown to Marcus, across town in a warehouse district, a group of men were planning something that would soon test every skill he had learned in his military career. The quiet guard's past was about to collide with his present in ways he could never have imagined. The stage was set for Marcus Thompson to discover that sometimes the most dangerous people are those who appear the most ordinary, and that 25 years of military training never really leaves a soldier's soul. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Marcus had been lying awake, staring at the ceiling when his phone rang with an unknown number. Years of military conditioning meant he was instantly alert, his hand reaching for the device without fumbling in the darkness. "Thompson," he answered, his voice steady despite being woken from restless sleep. "Sergeant Thompson, this is Colonel Richardson from MOD. We need to talk." Marcus sat up slowly. He recognized the name. Richardson had been his commanding officer's superior, a man who dealt with the most sensitive operations. The fact that he was calling personally meant this was serious. "I'm listening, sir." "Not over the phone. There's a car coming to pick you up in 30 minutes. Bring nothing. Tell no one." The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone for a moment, then got dressed in his usual methodical way. Dark jeans, plain black shirt, his old leather jacket. As he waited, he made coffee and thought about the letter on his kitchen table. He had been planning to call the number today during his lunch break. The black sedan arrived exactly 30 minutes later. Marcus locked his apartment and got into the back seat without a word. The driver was a young soldier who clearly had instructions not to engage in conversation. They drove through the empty city streets toward a part of town Marcus didn't recognize. Their destination was an unmarked government building, the kind that didn't appear on any official maps. Colonel Richardson met him in a sterile conference room on the 3rd floor. The man looked older than Marcus remembered, his hair now completely gray, his face lined with the stress of difficult decisions. "Marcus," Richardson said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." "Didn't seem like I had much choice, sir." Richardson smiled grimly. "You always were direct. Please sit down. We have a situation." The colonel activated a secure tablet and placed it on the table between them. The screen showed surveillance photos of several men, most of them young, all of them dangerous-looking. 3 weeks ago, a military transport convoy was ambushed outside Birmingham. The attackers knew exactly when and where to hit. They took weapons, ammunition, and something else. Prototype targeting equipment that's not supposed to exist. Marcus studied the photos without comment, his trained eye noting details others would miss. These weren't common criminals. Their positions in the surveillance photos showed tactical awareness, discipline. "We believe they have inside information," Richardson continued, "someone with access to classified military schedules and routes. The targeting equipment they stole is extremely sophisticated. In the wrong hands, it could turn any competent marksman into a precision killer from incredible distances. What does this have to do with me? I've been out for 3 years. Richardson leaned forward. Because yesterday we intercepted communications suggesting their next target is the defense contractor where you work. Meridian Electronics doesn't just make components for consumer products, Marcus. They manufacture guidance systems for our most advanced missile systems. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. The factory. Your factory. They've been watching it for weeks. We have reason to believe they'll strike during the shift change tomorrow evening, when the maximum number of employees will be entering and leaving. They want to create panic, take hostages, and steal classified prototypes from the secure wing. The secure wing. Marcus had always wondered about the restricted section of the factory, the area where his security clearance didn't extend. He had noticed the additional cameras, the reinforced doors, the employees who never spoke about their work. Why not just increase security? Bring in a tactical team? We can't. If they see obvious military presence, they'll abort and disappear. These aren't amateurs, Marcus. Their leader is a former Royal Marine named David Clark, discharged dishonorably 5 years ago. He's recruited others like him, ex-military with grudges against the system. Richardson slid another photo across the table. Marcus found himself looking at a man about his own age, with cold eyes and a familiar bearing. He had seen that look before, in soldiers who had been pushed too far by war and violence. Clark is smart, well-trained, and extremely dangerous, but he's also predictable to someone who understands military thinking. We need someone inside the factory, someone who knows the layout and can act without raising suspicion. You want me to be bait. I want you to be a guardian angel. You'll have backup, but they'll be positioned outside the perimeter. If things go wrong, you'll be the only one close enough to act quickly. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the photos and thinking about his co-workers. Jenny from accounting with her morning greetings. Bill, his supervisor, who had 3 grandchildren and talked about them constantly. The maintenance crew who always waved when they saw him. What kind of backup? Richardson smiled for the first time that morning. A sniper team on the building across the street, counter-surveillance units monitoring all approaches, a rapid response team 2 minutes away. But if they get inside, Marcus, you'll be our first and best line of defense. I'm a security guard now. I carry a flashlight and a radio. You're Sergeant Marcus Thompson, the man who held off a Taliban assault for 6 hours with limited ammunition. The marksman who eliminated hostile targets at ranges that broke records. The soldier who saved his entire unit when their position was overrun in Helmand Province. Marcus looked down at his hands. These hands had once been steady enough to place a bullet precisely where it needed to go from over a mile away. But that was before the nightmares. Before the medical discharge, before he chose the quiet life of a factory guard. I'll need equipment. Already arranged. There's a lockbox hidden in your security office, installed last night while you slept. Emergency code is Sarah's birthday. Marcus looked up sharply. How do you know about my wife? Because I know you, Marcus. I know what drives you, what you've lost, and what you're capable of. This isn't just about national security anymore. These men plan to hurt innocent people, people you see every day, people who trust you to keep them safe. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system. Marcus thought about his morning routine, nodding to familiar faces, checking badges with mechanical precision. He thought about the letter on his kitchen table, about Sarah's voice encouraging him to use his gifts to help others. If I do this, Marcus said slowly, and I'm not saying I will, what happens afterwards? That depends on you. There are opportunities for someone with your skills, consultancy work that pays well and helps keep the country safe. Or you can go back to your quiet life at the factory gates. Your choice. Richardson stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city beginning to wake up. I won't lie to you, Marcus. This is dangerous. Clark and his team are professionals and they'll be armed with military-grade weapons. But those people at your factory, they're counting on someone to protect them, even if they don't know it. Marcus closed his eyes and saw Sarah's face, remembered her words about his gifts. When he opened them again, his decision was made. I'll need a full briefing on the building layout, emergency procedures, and exact timing of their expected approach. Richardson turned back to him with a relieved expression. Already prepared? You'll have everything you need by this afternoon. As Marcus prepared to leave, Richardson placed a hand on his shoulder. For what it's worth, Marcus, I'm glad you're back. Marcus nodded and headed for the door. Tomorrow evening, the quiet security guard would discover if 3 years of peaceful factory work had dulled his edge, or if some skills never fade. Either way, his coworkers would finally learn that their silent guardian was much more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The next day passed differently than any other in Marcus's 3 years at Meridian Electronics. Every routine action now carried weight. Checking his watch wasn't just about tracking time, but counting down to when David Clark's team would arrive. Every familiar face took on new significance as Marcus realized he was responsible for their safety. During his lunch break, Marcus accessed the hidden lockbox in his security office, using Sarah's birthday as the code. Inside, he found equipment he hadn't seen in 3 years: a military-grade communication device, night vision goggles, and most importantly, a precision rifle broken down into components that fit perfectly in an inconspicuous case. He assembled the weapon with movements so automatic they seemed like muscle memory. The rifle was a newer model than what he had used in Afghanistan, but the fundamentals remained the same. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who had spent thousands of hours training with such equipment. The afternoon briefing came through his secure communication device. Clark's team had been spotted conducting final reconnaissance from a van parked 2 streets away. Satellite imagery showed 5 men total: Clark himself, 2 former soldiers dishonorably discharged like their leader, and 2 civilians with criminal records involving armed robbery. Their plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would approach the factory during shift change at 6 p.m., when the parking lot was full and security was focused on managing the flow of workers. The targeting equipment they had stolen would allow them to disable the building's security systems remotely. They intended to take hostages immediately and use them as leverage while they accessed the secure wing. Marcus spent his final hours of normal duty memorizing every detail of the updated building layout Richardson's team had provided. He noted emergency exits, potential choke points, and areas where civilians could be sheltered safely. Most importantly, he identified elevated positions that would give him clear sight lines if he needed to use his primary skill. At 5:30 p.m., Marcus positioned himself at his usual post by the main entrance. To any observer, he looked exactly as he did every other day: calm, professional, slightly bored. But beneath his uniform, he wore a tactical vest, and his communication device provided constant updates from the surveillance team. "Ghost 1, this is Overwatch," came the voice in his earpiece. "Target vehicle approaching from the east. 5 occupants confirmed." Marcus continued checking badges and nodding to departing employees as if nothing had changed. Jenny from accounting stopped to chat about weekend plans, completely unaware that the quiet guard was tracking a van full of armed men through his peripheral vision. "Have a good evening, Jenny," Marcus said, his voice carrying a warmth that surprised them both. "Get home safely." She smiled, pleased by the unusual conversation, and headed toward her car. Marcus made a mental note of her location. She would be one of the first civilians he needed to protect if things went wrong. "Ghost 1, targets have stopped 2 blocks out. They're suiting up." Marcus glanced at his watch. 5:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, the shift change would begin in earnest, and the parking lot would fill with vulnerable people. He activated a discreet alarm that would alert the factory's management to implement a lockdown procedure they didn't know they had been trained for. At exactly 6:01 p.m., the attack began. The first sign was the lights. Every exterior security light around the factory suddenly died, plunging the parking area into premature darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in moments later, but the confusion had already started. Workers stopped in their tracks, looking around uncertainly. Ghost 1, targets moving in from 3 directions, deploying smoke screens. Gray canisters rolled across the parking lot, rapidly filling the area with thick, obscuring smoke. Through his night vision goggles, Marcus could see the 5 men advancing with military precision, their movements coordinated and professional. The factory's lockdown alarm began blaring, a sound most employees had never heard before. Following protocols they had practiced in mandatory drills, workers began moving toward designated safe areas. But the smoke and confusion made the process chaotic. Marcus activated his radio to address the employees. "This is security. Move calmly to the nearest building entrance and proceed to your assigned emergency stations. Do not run. Do not panic. Help those around you." His steady voice cut through the chaos, and people began to move more purposefully. Years of being the quiet guardian had earned him trust he didn't realize he possessed. "Contact front!" The voice in his earpiece was sharp. "Armed hostiles at the main entrance." Through the smoke, Marcus saw Clark himself approaching the main doors, flanked by 2 of his men. They wore tactical gear and carried assault rifles with the casual confidence of professionals. Clark's cold eyes scanned the area, looking for targets and threats. Marcus stepped directly into their path, appearing to be nothing more than a confused security guard trying to do his job. "Sir, I need to ask you to leave the premises immediately," Marcus called out, his hands visible and empty. "We're conducting an emergency drill." Clark stopped and studied Marcus with the calculating gaze of a predator evaluating potential prey. "Just a security guard," he said to his men. "Secure him, but keep him alive. We might need him for access codes." One of Clark's men approached Marcus with zip ties, clearly intending to restrain him quickly and move on. It was exactly what Marcus had hoped for. They saw him as a minor obstacle, not a threat. The moment the man reached for his arm, Marcus moved. 25 years of military training erupted in a sequence of actions that lasted less than 3 seconds. The approaching soldier found himself disarmed, unconscious, and on the ground before he understood what had happened. Marcus now held the man's assault rifle and had positioned himself behind cover. "What the hell?" Clark's second man raised his weapon, but Marcus was already moving, using the smoke and his intimate knowledge of the area to his advantage. The sharp crack of Marcus's rifle echoed across the parking lot. Clark's second man dropped immediately, his weapon clattering across the pavement. The shot had been precise, disabling rather than lethal, but completely effective. "Sniper!" Clark yelled, diving for cover behind a parked car. "We've got a sniper in the building!" Through his communication device, Marcus heard the rapid chatter of the backup teams. "Ghost 1, beautiful shooting. Targets are fragmenting. 2 men approaching the south entrance, 1 moving to flank your position." Marcus was already relocating, moving through the factory with the fluid grace of someone who had spent 3 years memorizing every corridor, every hiding place, every angle. The employees were safely locked down in their emergency stations, following procedures that had been designed specifically for this moment. Clark's voice echoed across the parking lot, amplified by a megaphone he had brought for intimidating hostages. "I know you can hear me. We're not here for the workers, we just want what's in the secure wing. Let us take what we came for and nobody else gets hurt." Marcus keyed his radio to respond, but his voice came from a different location than Clark expected. "David Clark, former Royal Marine, dishonorably discharged for conduct unbecoming. You're surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now." "Who are you?" Clark's voice carried surprise and anger. "You're no factory security guard. I'm the man standing between you and innocent people. Last warning." The response was a burst of automatic fire that shattered windows but struck nothing vital. Marcus had anticipated the reaction and was already moving to his next position. Through his scope, he could see Clark coordinating with his remaining men, their movements becoming more desperate as they realized their simple smash-and-grab operation had become a tactical nightmare. The quiet security guard had become something else entirely. A hunter using skills honed in the world's most dangerous places to protect people who didn't even know they needed protecting. And David Clark was beginning to understand that he had badly underestimated his opposition. The battle for Meridian Electronics had only just begun, and Marcus Thompson was about to remind everyone why the SAS was considered one of the world's most elite fighting forces. The factory had become a maze of shadows and danger, but it was Marcus's maze. Every corner, every corridor, every hiding place was as familiar to him as his own apartment. Clark and his remaining men were skilled, but they were operating on foreign ground against someone who had turned this building into his personal fortress. "Overwatch to Ghost 1, came the voice in his earpiece. "Target 4 is attempting to breach the south entrance. Target 5 is moving around to the loading dock. Clark is holding position behind the blue sedan." Marcus acknowledged the report with a single click of his radio. He was positioned on the second floor of the factory, in a maintenance area that gave him perfect sight lines to multiple approach routes. His rifle was equipped with the kind of optics that made precision shooting possible, even in low-light conditions. Through his scope, he watched Clark's men move with increasing desperation. Their original plan had been simple: overwhelm security quickly, grab what they needed, and disappear. But now they were trapped in a tactical situation against an opponent whose capabilities they had completely misjudged. The man approaching the south entrance moved carefully, using parked cars for cover. Marcus tracked him through the scope, noting the soldier's training in his movement patterns. This was one of Clark's ex-military recruits, someone who understood urban combat. He would be dangerous if he got inside. Marcus made his shot count. The bullet struck the man's shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him behind cover. Not lethal, but completely incapacitating. Through his earpiece, Marcus could hear the wounded man calling for medical assistance that wouldn't be coming. 2 down, 3 to go, Marcus whispered to himself, the familiar calm of combat settling over him like an old coat. This was what he had been trained for, what he had spent 25 years perfecting. The quiet security guard was gone, replaced by Sergeant Marcus Thompson of the 22nd SAS. Clark's voice echoed across the parking lot again, but now it carried a note of frustrated anger. "I know who you are now. Marcus Thompson, the ghost sniper of Helmand Province. They said you were broken, medically discharged, finished." Marcus keyed his radio, his voice carrying across the area with deadly calm. "I was never broken, Clark. I was just tired of killing people who deserved it." The psychological warfare was deliberate. Clark needed to understand that he wasn't facing a factory security guard or even a competent soldier. He was facing someone whose reputation had become legend in certain circles, someone whose precision with a rifle had saved countless lives and ended many others. "Target 5 is inside the building," Overwatch reported. "Loading dock entry confirmed." Marcus was already moving. He knew exactly where the loading dock intruder would go, toward the secure wing where the valuable prototypes were stored. The factory's layout would funnel him through a specific corridor, and Marcus intended to be waiting. He moved through the building like a ghost, his footsteps silent on floors he had walked for 3 years. Every emergency light, every security camera, every potential ambush point was known to him. The intruder might be ex-military, but Marcus was fighting on his home ground. The confrontation came in the main corridor leading to the secure wing. Marcus heard the man before he saw him. Soft footsteps, the quiet click of equipment against a tactical vest. The intruder was good, but not good enough. Marcus stepped around the corner with his rifle raised. "Stop right there!" The man spun toward him, bringing up his own weapon. But Marcus was faster. His shot took the intruder in the leg, dropping him immediately. Before the wounded man could recover, Marcus was on him, securing his weapon and zip-tying his hands with the efficiency of long practice. "That's 3, Marcus said into his radio. 2 more to go." Outside, Clark had realized his tactical situation was hopeless. His men were down, his element of surprise was gone, and he was facing an opponent who outmatched him in every way. But pride and desperation made him dangerous in a different way. "Thompson!" Clark's voice carried a new edge. "You think you're some kind of hero? I know about your wife, about why you really left the service. How many sleepless nights, Marcus?" "How many nightmares?" Marcus felt the familiar cold anger settle in his chest, but his training kept him focused. Clark was trying to provoke him, to make him emotional and careless. It was a tactic Marcus had seen before, and he wouldn't fall for it. "I've got the stolen targeting equipment with me," Clark continued. "Military-grade hardware that could turn any building in this city into a shooting gallery. Surrender now, and maybe we can make a deal." Through his scope, Marcus could see Clark positioning himself near a group of parked cars where several late-shift workers were still taking shelter. The man's intentions were clear. If he couldn't complete his mission, he would take hostages to ensure his escape. "Negative," Marcus said into his radio when Overwatch suggested waiting for the rapid response team. "He's moving toward civilians. I'm taking the shot." The distance was roughly 400 meters with a slight crosswind and limited lighting. For most marksmen, it would be an impossible shot. For Marcus Thompson, it was Tuesday evening. He controlled his breathing, feeling his heartbeat slow as he entered the zone that had made him legendary. The rifle became an extension of his will, the scope showing him a target that existed in a bubble of perfect clarity. Everything else, the noise, the chaos, the danger, fell away. Clark was moving toward the civilian vehicles when Marcus squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect. Clark dropped instantly, his weapon flying across the pavement as the bullet struck him in the shoulder and spun him to the ground. The stolen targeting equipment scattered from his backpack, its components spreading across the asphalt. "Target 1 down," Marcus reported. "All hostiles neutralized." The rapid response team arrived 3 minutes later to find the situation completely under control. Clark and his men were secured and receiving medical attention, the stolen equipment was recovered, and not a single civilian had been seriously harmed. Marcus stood in the factory parking lot as paramedics tended to Clark, watching the man who had underestimated a quiet security guard. Clark's cold eyes met his across the distance, and Marcus saw recognition there, not just of his identity, but of the vast gulf that separated a good soldier from a legendary one. Colonel Richardson arrived as the scene was being secured. He found Marcus sitting on a concrete barrier, his rifle disassembled and packed away, looking once again like nothing more than a factory security guard. "How are you feeling?" Richardson asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question. His hands were steady, his breathing normal. The nightmares and flashbacks that had plagued him for 3 years seemed distant now, as if confronting real danger had somehow quieted the demons of memory. "I feel like myself again," Marcus said simply. Richardson nodded. "The offer I mentioned is still open. Consultancy work, training programs, special assignments. Your country could use someone with your skills." Marcus looked across the parking lot at his co-workers, who were being released from their emergency stations. Jenny from accounting spotted him and waved, relief evident on her face. Bill, his supervisor, was already heading over to check on him. These people had trusted him to keep them safe, and he had done exactly that. "I'll think about it," Marcus said. "But for now, I have a job here. These people count on me." Richardson smiled. "I understand. But Marcus, if you ever change your mind, you know how to reach us." As the colonel walked away, Jenny arrived with her usual bright smile, though it was tinged with concern. "Marcus, are you okay?" That was terrifying. I've never seen anything like what happened here tonight. Marcus looked at her kind face, thinking about how close she had come to serious danger, how many people could have been hurt if things had gone differently. "I'm fine, Jenny," he said, and for the first time in 3 years he truly meant it. "Just doing my job." The next morning, Marcus returned to his post at the factory gates. His uniform was pressed, his boots polished, and his eyes held the same quiet alertness they always had. To most observers, nothing had changed. He still nodded politely to employees, checked identification badges, and spoke only when necessary. But word had spread, as word always does. The quiet security guard who had saved everyone's lives, who had taken on trained killers and won without breaking a sweat. People looked at him differently now, with respect and curiosity and gratitude. Marcus didn't mind the attention, but he preferred the routine. Check badges, monitor the cameras, file reports. Simple, honest work that let him protect good people doing important jobs. And if trouble ever came again, if dangerous men ever threatened his workplace and his co-workers, they would learn the same lesson David Clark had learned. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who says the least. Marcus Thompson, the quiet guard who spoke little, had proved once again why he was the SAS's most dangerous marksman. And now he stood watch over Meridian Electronics, a silent guardian whose greatest strength had always been knowing when to remain hidden and when to reveal the warrior within. The letter from the Ministry of Defense still sat on his kitchen table, but Marcus was no longer concerned about his future. He had found his place, protecting the people who mattered, using skills honed in war to preserve peace. Sarah would have been proud.